Do you think veganism, in certain instances, when you see it the way that it manifests within certain sections of society, do you think it's almost akin to a religion?
Well, people say this about all kinds of things. They say it about wokeism. They say it about anything that becomes a philosophy that people care about. Let's say.
No, but people mean something else too. On all the examples you're giving. What they mean when people say that wokeness is a religion, or that I've never heard anyone say veganism is a religion. I certainly wouldn't argue that. However, what people mean is that it is a set of beliefs that it causes people to behave in a way that is impractical and irrational, and they do it in the service of an idea that has almost mythical power over them. What I would say is a religion is the doomerism of climate change. There's it has every element of religion, including people acting irrationally.
I know what you mean, but would you say, for example, that you've probably had people on the show talking about the threats of artificial intelligence.
Yes.
And how there's potentially sort of calamitous world-ending implications. Would you call that a religion?
I wouldn't call that a religion, because they don't behave in the same way about it. They're not going out and throwing soup on things.
Because we say that, but then I don't think there's, like, if people start taking seriously the idea that we seriously need to slow down or stop artificial intelligence. Look at the environmental movement where people start raising awareness that climate change is a thing, and then a couple of decades later, people start taking it very seriously and start protesting in the streets. And then the arguments are sort of like, well, look, I get what you're saying. It's probably right, but your methods aren't effective. And, what about China? Why should I care about what we're doing? Right. The same thing can happen here with artificial intelligence. It's already happening when people say, hey, let's just slow down. Let's put a pause on this technology. And people are saying, what, you think that other countries are going to put a pause on this? No, there's nothing we can do, right? And it's also apocalyptic. The world's going to end. Like, all of the elements that you're identifying as potentially religious here, based on this, you call it mythical, but it's always grounded in some kind of reality, right? Like the climate change stuff is grounded in the science. The veganism stuff is grounded in the very real animal cruelty. The artificial intelligence stuff is grounded in the actual technology of AI. But it's still, I could describe it as an apocalyptic death cult. And I could say that the effective altruists are saying that we should stop taking money that we're currently giving to try and, fix malaria and buy malaria nets. We should be taking that money away from that kind of suffering and investing it into AI safety, because that's a more important issue long term. If they're correct, then maybe that is what we should be doing. But it seems ludicrous and irrational to stop giving money to people in need to try and lift people out of poverty.
Well, we haven't had anyone like that on the show.
So that we can build better computers, but people are doing that, right? And so I could point to people like that and say, see, this AI thing, it's just it's an apocalyptic death cult. And I feel like that's kind of what people do when they point to veganism, wokeism, environmentalism, and say it's a religion.
No, I disagree. And here's why. I think the reason I disagree is people who are warning about AI, the people who are at the forefront of that, the people who are being talked up as the warning necessarily about these issues, they're people who are otherwise sensible and who are advocating fairly sensible things like, this is a new technology, we don't know how powerful it's going to be, let's slow it down, let's make sure that we're not overusing it, let's make sure it's regulated, etc. Right? The people who are advocating on the environmental issue, for example, they're people who are demanding that we essentially suicide our economies in order, by the way, to make very, very little impact on the problem. There's a very big difference between those two things. So it's kind of like, people say this about the BBC. People say, well, the BBC, you've got left-wing critics and right-wing critics, therefore the BBC is in the middle. And by the way, some departments are in the middle. But actually, if you look at who the critics are, who say it's too left-wing versus too right-wing, it's a very different picture. The mainstream centre-right thinks the BBC is incredibly left-wing. The people who think the BBC is right-wing are people on the very, very extremes of the left. So just because people are criticising an issue or there's that parallel doesn't mean it's the same thing. And I think AI is not the best example for those reasons.
And also as well, one of the core components of any religion is a moral framework. So if you look at wokeism, for example, that has a very clear delineated moral framework, which the AI example doesn't, in my opinion.
Yes, I think I see what you're saying and will agree with elements as you do with any conversation like this. The idea that the people at the forefront, are not going a bit crazy, I would say just wait. I mean,
Elon Musk is not Greta Thunberg, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Sure, but you understand that, like, I don't know where you consider yourself politically. I know that you were named in the New Statesman's list of the top 50 most powerful conservatives. Congratulations,
46.
by the way.
46. Four positions above the former Prime Minister Liz Truss.
Yeah, do you know, it's funny.
Imagine how high up I would be if I were actually conservative.
When you were on my show, and I asked you about being a conservative, and I posted that clip when that was announced, because there was this clip of you saying I'm not a conservative.
Yeah.
And when I gave the context that the New Statesman had labelled you as the 46th most powerful conservative, I didn't mean for that to cause this, but people were they began attacking the New Statesman, saying, the New Statesman, they're lying about Konstantin, they're attacking him as a conservative. I don't think they were doing that. I think they just genuinely saw you that way. But what I was going to say is, suppose you are a conservative, you're going to look at Greta Thunberg and think, she's insane, she's crazy, she's absolutely mental. Okay, fine, right? If you're on the left, you might look at her and say, well, look, sometimes I think that she says something a bit silly, but she's not like crazy like they're making her out to be. Now, you compared her to Elon Musk a second ago. Look at what left-wingers say about Elon Musk all the time. Look at the way they describe him. Look at how they say that he's one of the most dangerous people on planet Earth, that he's insane, that he's immoral, that he's evil. I would wager that you don't agree with that. But clearly, this is being thrown at in both directions.
No, but
right?
Alex, this is the point that I think we're disagreeing over. The fact that people say the same thing about different people is not necessarily a reflection of the fact that those people are equivalent.
Of course.
Right? You have to look at who it is that is saying it and why they're saying it. What I say about Greta Thunberg is not based on some kind of personal antipathy towards her. It's based on the fact that what she's advocating for is impractical and irrational and would be very damaging to the very people on whose behalf she's advocating.
Yes.
Right? What people say about Elon Musk is essentially a guy who's not one of us has taken over one of the means of communication and we don't like it. That's a big difference.
I would say, and I suppose the only point I'm making here is that if you were speaking to somebody who was like a Greta fan and somebody who hated Elon Musk, if they were sat in this chair and they were able to articulate it.
What would they say? That's interesting.
Well, I don't know what they would say because I'm not really in that position, but they would probably say something like what you've just said. They'd say, They'd say, my dislike for Elon Musk is not some. I don't think he's just it's because he's not one of us because he's this billionaire and I just hate people like that. No, it's based on the things that he does. It's based on his Twitter. I don't know.
But you have to say this other bit, otherwise this conversation doesn't make any sense. What is the rational critique of Elon Musk? And I can give you one. It's just not going to be the one from these people.
Sure. Well, maybe Elon Musk is the wrong example for me to be talking about.
Okay, give another example.
Or is it potentially with Musk, what they would say is that his views aren't consistent and they're dishonest because he claims to be in favour of freedom of speech, but then he bans the accounts.
But that isn't their critique, though. That isn't their critique. That's a critique that I can give and you can give and Alice can give because we recognize but this is what I said, free speech absolutism doesn't exist. Nobody who says they're free speech absolutism is something you can maintain when you're sitting in your basement. Yeah. Or your mother's basement, more likely, right? Once you get into the real world and you start to have to make decisions about how to administer content on a platform, free speech absolutism is impossible. So that's a valid critique. It's not consistent. But that is not what the equivalent of the Greta critics might be saying about Elon, right? So let's have another example because this is an interesting point you're making.
That's also not equivalent to what the critics of Greta often, because you sit there in the chair and say, well, I think I don't like what Greta's saying because I think that what she's saying is fundamentally self-destructive or something like that, right? But surely you know that there are people who do just say she's an annoying teenager. Why would
she's definitely that too.
This kind like.
But she is that too.
It doesn't matter where you look, right? Like you're going to get both. You're going to have people looking at Elon Musk and saying, I think that he claims to be pro-free speech, but he's banning people on Twitter, and this is sort of going to have a knock-on negative effect onto the sort of cultural social media, right? And then you're also going to get people who say he's a billionaire asshole, right? And the same thing's going to happen with Greta Thunberg.
No, but my point is the people who are making the critique that Francis just made are not on the left. It's more people like us who are in the heterodox center or whatever who are going to go, because the right will love him for opening up the Overton window, whatever. But people who are objective will say, look, I think it's incredible that he's bought Twitter, just because it's the one place where there's less censorship now, and that means everyone else, there's no point for them censoring on Facebook and elsewhere because you're still going to get the information from Twitter. So I think it's great. But the critique still applies, which is he claimed he was a free speech absolutist. I just think it was a sorry, Elon wants me assassinated. I just think it was a mistake to do so.
It's an interesting example because free speech has kind of become a bit of a right-wing issue, which,
Yes.
which kind of complicates this particular example.
Yes.
But I mean, do you think that there aren't any left-wing critiques of Elon Musk to be taken seriously?
You give me one and we can talk about it.
I mean, well, again, this Elon Musk was probably the right. I can't remember who first mentioned
let's
him.
pick a different person.
But
then.
whatever. But before we do as well, because we were talking about this in the context of the AI thing, and you were saying,
Yes.
People aren't, as Greta is in your view, going out and telling people to do things which are essentially suicidal.
Yes.
Wait until artificial intelligence becomes, as it's already becoming, integral to our sort of workforce and economy. And wait until, while that's the case, people begin to take really seriously the idea that it's incredibly dangerous and start saying we need to put an end to this, and people start protesting in the streets. It's coming down the road. And when that happens, what are people going to say? They're going to point to the protesters of artificial intelligence, and they're saying they're essentially telling us to suicide our own society.
And I'll be one of them.
Because it will destroy our economy.
And I'll be one of the people making that critique.
And that's why I think, although you might be right that right now they're disanalogous because people aren't doing that yet, I don't think we're far off that.
Okay, fine. So at some point, you believe it will become cultish or religious in nature, certainly according to the definition that Francis gave.
To the same extent that you would, because you were asking about whether veganism is a religion. I think if yes, then only to the same extent that something like, in more obvious cases, environmentalism, wokeism, but also because especially I think listeners to the show will happily think, yeah, that's a bit religious. But when you think about something like AI, you think it'd be really weird to call that like a religion. But you can see how just having a sort of moral position on an important issue and it becoming basically the focal point of your campaigning can very easily be described in religious terms. If you enjoyed that clip, you can watch the full conversation by clicking the link on your screen. And if you want to get early access to my videos, as well as getting them ad-free and support the channel at the same time, then go to patreon.com/AlexOC. Thanks for watching, subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you in the next one.